Hi everybody. Today is Tuesday, January 28th, and our friend 2025, and our friend Scott Ritter is back with us. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get started, Scott, with something new from on the part of Putin. He tried to talk with the people in the West directly, and he says that what is happening in the West is the direct consequence of what the leadership has been doing to the West in the last 3 years in Ukraine. How, in your opinion, why did he decide to do that? Why did he decide to talk directly with the people? Or is he's talking with Donald Trump, is not really aiming at the people?
I mean, frankly speaking, only Vladimir Putin can answer the question is why he does anything. It's, I think, he knows that he's in a period of trying to shape impressions in the lead up to what could be a momentous meeting with Donald Trump, and that Donald Trump's perceptions are derived from I don't want to call it superficial, but more immediate sources. That Donald Trump's more likely to be swayed by short statements that can be broken into video clips and shared on social media than he is substantive policy papers. And so I think, Putin is seeking different ways to influence Donald Trump. He's made several statements to the media, to press, and he is engaged in this sort of indirect communication, speaking to a Western population, but knowing that the true audience is Donald Trump.
But many people are so confused with the way that Donald Trump is handling the case of Ukraine. Before 2024 presidential election, the way he was talking about Ukraine was totally different from what we've seen so far in the aftermath of the election. Do you think it's it's a strategic manner on his part, because not only about exaggerating the casualties on the part of Russians hugely, a million, which doesn't make sense to anybody, even not in the mainstream media, they're not talking that way, and underestimating the casualties on the part of Ukrainians. And then it seems to me that he's trying to put some sort of pressure on the way he's trying to communicate with Russian people. He's trying to say that the situation is not that good as you think it is. Is that the case? Is that part of the sort of manner on the part of Donald Trump to put pressure on Putin?
I don't know. Again, these is something that only Donald Trump can answer. What we do know is that Donald Trump knows nothing about Russia. He knows nothing about Vladimir Putin. He had, a meeting. I think there were actually a couple meetings, but they're superficial. Donald Trump was ill prepared for both meetings. Donald Trump isn't the kind of man who does his homework. He comes in with preconceived notions of what he wants to achieve. And he's susceptible to being abused by the people closest to him. We do know that he has been heavily influenced by Keith Kellogg. Keith Kellogg wrote a paper back in, I think, April or May of last year, which serves as the foundation of the policy options that are being briefed to Donald Trump. This paper is superficial, nonsensical, factually inaccurate, erroneous in analysis. It's a horrible paper, but from this paper comes the advice given to Donald Trump. He's following bad advice, horrible advice, and it's not having the impact. Donald Trump speaking directly to the Russian people. I don't think the Russian people are this superficial, this shallow. They know who Donald Trump is. They're aware of the totality of his, posturing when it comes to Russia. They also know that Donald Trump can't be trusted at all. I mean, this is, I don't know who Donald Trump thinks he's fooling, but the Russians don't have short memories. The Russians are fully cognizant of the fact that Donald Trump, when he was president last time, promised that he was pursuing friendship and ended up being a president that was horrible for Russia, imposing sanctions. But not just that. I mean, Donald Trump, this notion that that Donald Trump wouldn't have allowed this war to take place is a lie. This war is Donald Trump's war. He created the conditions. Never forget that the Russian maneuvering that took place in 2021 is, the maneuvering of troops is because of policies put in place by Donald Trump to rebuild the Ukrainian army, to position the Ukrainian army so that they can pose an offensive military threat to the Russians of the Donbass. Straight up. Donald Trump did that. Donald Trump armed them. Donald Trump's the one that went along with the facade of Minsk, leading the Russians down a path, believing that there was going to be, peace all along, knowing that it wasn't. It was just to buy time to build up the army that Donald Trump built up. Donald Trump put the NATO training facility in the Western Ukraine in 2017. Donald Trump built a battalion of Ukrainian forces every 55 days designed to fight to NATO standards to recapture the Donbass. Donald Trump did that. And he wants, maybe in the West we'll forget it. The Russians aren't going to forget that. They know damn well who he is and what he has done. This is Donald Trump's war. And now he's trying to pretend that it isn't. It isn't going to work. It isn't going to fly. So who knows what the hell's going on in Donald Trump's brain? I don't even think Donald Trump knows what the hell's going on in Donald Trump's brain. The problem is he's so deceptive that he deceives himself.
Who's the most influential character in his administration, in your opinion, if he himself is not?
Regarding Russia?
Regarding Russia.
For the moment, Keith Kellogg, but the one thing that Donald Trump won't tolerate is losing. And Keith Kellogg's setting Donald Trump up to be a failure, to lose. And I think at some point in time, Keith Kellogg will be jettisoned because he's nothing more than an anchor around Donald Trump's neck. Donald Trump needs better advisors. And right now, he's being poorly advised.
Because as we talked before, Scott, you said that Donald Trump is going to be in charge of the main policies of his administration. And we know, at least from what we've seen so far with the new people coming to the administration, Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio and even Mike Waltz, these people are not that much influential before, because we had Rex Tillerson, John Bolton. These people were so much powerful when they came to the first administration of Donald Trump. But the new people are not that much powerful, are not that much ideological, and they can be reshaped by Donald Trump. Do you think that's still the case in the new administration, in this administration?
I think Donald Trump learned his lesson from the first 4 years that he was president, not to surround himself with people who thought that they could do a better job than the president could do. Donald Trump has made it clear that he is the president. He alone makes policy, and that if you're going to serve in his administration, you will be subordinated to his will, to his policy designs. And we even saw this with Marco Rubio, who was a one-time political, opponent of Donald Trump, has totally just caved. Marco Rubio is a man who makes it clear that he works for President Trump. He's also acknowledged that there will be places where he will not, tread because it's Trump land, and Russian policy is one of those places. So that, that's where we're at. But the problem is you end up creating a bunch of yes men. Again, I just keep telling Donald Trump, hey, boss, give me an afternoon. Bring all your Russian people in, bring me in. And by the time we're finished, you'll fire all of them and you'll invite me back because they're misleading you about Russia. And it's too bad. It's, there is an opportunity here to solve not just the problem of Ukraine, but the problem of European security. And if Donald Trump was smart and properly advised, he would, and if this is done in terms of a business deal, we're talking about leveraging one property into a bigger property. That is letting the Russians get what they want in Ukraine, but making sure that what a post-conflict European security framework looks like is something the United States can live with, as opposed to being dictated to by a victorious Russia, because we don't have a plan, because we thought that the issue was Ukraine when it's not Ukraine. Russia has said it's not Ukraine. Why do you think Russia put forward the draft treaties they did on December 17th, 2021? Those treaties were designed to avoid a Ukrainian conflict, to focus on the major issue, which was European security framework. That's where Donald Trump needs to be focused on. Ukraine's a lost cause. We're not going to solve it. He needs to stop pretending that he can somehow fix it. He knows what he was trying to accomplish in Ukraine. Remember those 20 bases, the CIA bases that went in there? Who was the president when they went in? Donald Trump. What was the policy of the United States when Donald Trump was president? The strategic defeat of Russia. So, Donald Trump's not fooling anybody. He needs to acknowledge that the policies are failed and come up with something that protects America's national security interests. We're not protected when we continue to pursue bad policy in Ukraine.
It seems that the main objective, as you mentioned, is the same as we've seen in the Biden administration. But Donald Trump, he's trying. Did you see his video to Davos, in which he was saying that he would put pressure on Saudi Arabia, MBS, to reduce the price of oil? And that would consequently influence the Russian economy. The Russian economy would influence the decision of Vladimir Putin, and goes on and on in his calculation. Do you find that a simplistic way of thinking about the conflict in Ukraine?
Yeah, anybody would with a brain. Look, Donald Trump's a transactional person. He thinks everything comes down to transaction and greed. Because he's a man who has no principle, no moral foundation, no ideology other than money, he can't understand a nation that was willing to sacrifice so much to achieve a result that truly impacts. The Russians didn't go to war in Ukraine lightly. This is a big deal for them. This is about NATO expansion. This is about the future of Russia. This is about preserving Russian cultural heritage. Everything. And so, Russia's not going to give up all of that because Donald Trump got the price of oil to go to $45 a barrel. And again, it just shows how stupid Donald Trump is and how stupid his advisors are. Right now, I think the price of oil is about $78 a barrel. That's low. The break-even point for Saudi Arabia is in about $85. That's what they need to balance their budget. So Saudi Arabia right now is basically living off of their savings in order to do United States and the world a favor during a political season where we didn't want gas prices to go up too much. But and the other thing is the break-even point for Russian oil is about $41 a barrel. That's what it costs to produce. Russia needs oil up around $70 to balance their budget, maybe $75 to balance their budget. But to continue to produce oil, Russia needs it around above $41. That's about the average cost of a barrel out of the ground. So as long as it's above $41, Russia can continue to produce oil economically. They aren't going to sell enough, or make enough to balance their budget, but they can continue to produce oil. Saudi Arabia, the cost for a barrel is around $10. So that you can bring that price down as much as you want. Saudi Arabia is still going to be able to produce oil. But here's the problem. The United States. Since 2020, all of America's oil growth comes from the Permian Basin of West Texas. All of our new wells are there. The break-even point for an existing Permian Basin well is around $33. So if oil's at 45, they can still make some money. But for new wells, all of our new production, new wells, the average break-even point is $66. You drop the price of oil below $50, I'm a Marine and math isn't my thing, but 45 is lower than 50, and you collapse the new oil production market in the United States. And within 2 years, we'll lose 30% of our oil production. Um, Donald Trump is just stupid. Does he really think that West Texas oilmen, especially the wildcatters who've poured in their entire future, they've gambled everything on the promise of market stability made by the U.S. government, that oil will be kept between $76 and $80 a barrel. So now they can say, okay, we can go ahead and put in these wells and start production, to get our money recouped. He thinks, what, you're going to go in and drop oil? Russia can produce oil forever. Saudi Arabia can produce oil forever. The United States can't produce oil forever. We keep oil at $45 a barrel for 2 years. Our oil economy collapses, and we have people who will lose everything. And when the West Texas economy collapses, the American economy collapses. Donald Trump is dumber than a box of bricks if he thinks this is a strategy that works. The other thing is, didn't he know what happened the last time he played stupid games? This is what could happen. As the price lowers, the Saudis and the Russians just keep pumping oil out. And so now you have low oil, you have a glut, and the price shrinks even lower. And now it can drop down to $21 a barrel. The Saudis keep going to 10. There's certain oil fields in Russia that can produce oil at 12. And they'll just keep pushing. They'll keep pushing oil on the market. And you know what happens to all the American money? It loses all value. In fact, to own a barrel of oil costs you money, because now you're going to have to pay the oil you have. There's no storage. And so having oil doesn't make you money. It costs you money. That's what happened back in, I think in 2020. The price of oil went from being, $30 a barrel to negative $18 a barrel. Is that really the game that Donald Trump's ready to play? Let me just say something to Donald Trump and his advisor right now. Saudi Arabia and Russia knows the oil production business better than you do. Donald Trump is a New York State real estate guy. He ain't Rex Tillerson. He's not, any of these other oil men. Bring an oil man into your business before you start talking stupidity. Fire Keith Kellogg now. The man doesn't know anything about anything. Okay? He looked good on Fox TV, and I guess he whispered sweet nothings in your ear, but he knows nothing about nothing. Get rid of him, because he's going to destroy the credibility of your administration. You got one shot at Vladimir Putin. One shot. Make it a good shot. Make peace happen. If not, Russia will just ride this thing out, and Russia will outlast Donald Trump. There's the other guarantee. I can guarantee one thing: Vladimir Putin will be the president of Russia when Donald Trump's term ends. And if Donald Trump screws this up, Vladimir Putin will be the president of Russia when J.D. Vance's one-term presidency ends and the Democrats come back in after 8 years. So, it's up to Trump. He's just poorly advised right now. Poorly advised.
Do we know who's behind choosing these people like Kellogg? Because as we've been watching his videos on Fox News, and the way that he was talking about the conflict, it wasn't that much different from the Biden administration. And here comes the question: who? So for what reason Donald Trump has decided to choose him? It's
loyalty. That's it. That's the only litmus test. Loyalty.
But he's going to be in charge of Ukraine. How is that loyalty going to work with him and his administration if he's not going to improve the situation in Ukraine in favor of the United States?
Well, Donald Trump isn't looking for another Mike Pompeo or John Bolton or H.R. McMaster or anybody like that. Donald Trump's looking for people who will just say yes, sir, and tell Donald Trump what he wants to hear. But Donald Trump isn't loyal to any man. And so Keith Kellogg will fail and he'll be fired. That's the kind of person Donald Trump's looking for.
And Vladimir Putin, we know that before 2024 presidential election, many people in Russia, they had some sort of hope with the new administration, with the Trump administration. Do you think that sort of hope is fading away, or we have to wait and see the meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin? And I personally don't believe that would be a huge deal on the part of considering what's going on in Ukraine, because Donald Trump at the end of the day would decide based on what's he getting from the intelligence from these people in who are in contact with Keith Kellogg.
I'm not quite sure what the question is.
The question is, how is the meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin is a great deal in terms of solving the situation in Ukraine?
I don't think the Russians have any false expectations. They know who Donald Trump is. They also understand the vagaries of American politics. They don't trust the United States as far as you can throw the United States. So I think the Russians are playing a game right now, giving Donald Trump a chance. Why not? What does it hurt? Let him come in. If he's willing to do things, do it. Yeah. But the Russians aren't going to change anything about what they're doing. They're winning. So they're not going to yield. They're not going to give anything up. They're going to give Donald Trump a chance. And when he fails, and I believe he will fail, Russia will say, well, I'm sorry, you go back to the United States and do whatever it is the hell you're doing over there, but we're going to just continue winning this war. And we're prepared to do it the easy way or the hard way. I mean, Donald Trump threatening the Russians, we're going to do it the hard way. What a stupid threat. I mean, it's just nonsensical. But, Russia's doing it the hard way right now on the ground in Ukraine, slaughtering the Ukrainians, pushing forward relentlessly. And the Ukrainians have no chance to stop them. NATO has nothing to stop them with. This is what Donald Trump inherited. And the U.S. doesn't have the military power to intervene meaningfully. And it would be in total opposition to the policy direction that Donald Trump claims he wants to go, to get out of entangling wars that they can't win. So he needs better advisors. He really does need better advisors. I mean, just again, to show you how stupid Keith Kellogg is, how superficially stupid Keith Kellogg is. He's actually put forward a 100-day plan that has the Russians signing an agreement on May 9th. May 9th is the day Russia says we buy into this agreement. But what is the agreement? Russians surrender. So he expects the Russians to surrender on May 9th, Victory Day, not just any Victory Day, the 80th anniversary of the Soviet and Allied victory over Nazi Germany. Keith Kellogg truly is the stupidest man to ever populate the planet, if he thinks that ever has a snowball chance in hell of happening. I'm sorry. That just shows anybody even put that into the plan. They're ignorant about the realities of Russia. Even if everything you said about Russian casualties figures were true, Russia would never surrender on May 9th. And the deal that Keith Kellogg is asking Russia to buy into is a surrender. And Russia's not defeated. The smartest thing Donald Trump could do, call me president, is tell Putin, hey, on May 9th, I'd like to send a delegation of American service members to march in the parade with you in commemoration of this grand event. And I'd like to send an American delegation. I won't be able to go because I shouldn't go until we actually have, something solid there. But I would like to send a delegation from the United States to include troops to march in a parade in recognition of, what Russia. That would go very far. That would probably be a stroke of genius, because the Russians, now you're playing to their soul. And the Russians would have deep appreciation for that and read into that you actually respect them and understand them. And that's the foundation you want when it comes to making difficult choices down the road. The Russians would be more likely to listen to anything you might put on the table after that gesture, as opposed to trying to get them to surrender on May 9th. It just isn't going to happen.
What was happening before Donald Trump takes office in Washington? I was thinking that he's gonna put an end to the conflict in Ukraine. He's trying to get maybe negotiations with Iran and Russia, and just making some sort of rapprochement between the two countries, and then dealing with China. But so far, it seems that it's the opposite way. He's trying to play with China. He's trying to get closer to China, talk with Xi against to convince them to help Donald Trump against Russia. How is he going to do that? Do you think that with what we've seen so far between Xi and Putin, is that a viable choice?
Again, Donald Trump needs better Chinese advisors too. Trump is an egotist, and he keeps saying that, I know Xi better than anybody else. I have deep insight to this. He doesn't know anything about Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin have a deep friendship, not just not just a friendly relationship as president, but friendship themselves. They truly like each other. They get along with each other. And the idea that Trump is going to come in and break this friendship apart, what does Trump have to offer? Nothing. I mean, it's interesting what he's doing with Taiwan right now. Sanctioning the Taiwanese chip makers and all this stuff. If I were the Taiwanese, I go ahead and accept the fact that America is not a friend. I've been telling them so all along, and that their best course of action is to turn to the Xi Jinping right now and say, how do we do this? What do we need to do? We can't deal with this person anymore. We don't know what the hell this is. We need to have that, one nation, two systems approach. Let's do that now, and just leave the United States in the lurch. Because that's the direction it's heading. We'll abandon Taiwan because we don't stand for anything. Now, again, if Trump was smart, he would go to China and say, I want to work with you on bringing it into the Taiwan crisis, and to in a way that satisfies you and satisfies us. You get political capital out of that. And now you've shown yourself to be a friend of China, and now they might listen to you when you talk about Russia and things of that nature. But China owes Trump nothing, and Trump has nothing on China. There's nothing he can bring to the table. So this is ridiculous that he's somehow going to play the two sides off against each other.
The head of Ukrainian intelligence, Budanov, said that there was a leak that it seems to me that he said that they need to negotiate as soon as possible before summer, because everything is just collapsing in Ukraine. Do you think that has anything to do with the reality of what's going on in Ukraine?
Well, he's the head of intelligence, and he says everything's collapsing. That sounds like it's realistically based. There won't be negotiations. I mean, if Donald Trump wants to take one thing away, Zelensky will not be at the table. Zelensky won't be recognized as the leader. Russia just isn't going to recognize Zelensky. Zelensky needs to be removed and replaced with somebody who will then understand what's at stake here, which is the surrender of Ukraine, not a negotiation. And that's the reality. The Ukrainians keep acting as if they have a vote in how this ends. They don't. They lost. And that's the reality. Russia will continue to put pressure. This front is collapsing quicker than most people recognize. There's nothing left to back it up. NATO is bankrupt. NATO troops will never be permitted on the soil of Ukraine. The United States isn't willing to go to war over Ukraine. Russia has military reserves and military production capacity and, the operational momentum. This is a conflict that Russia is going to win handily in the very short, in the next couple months. So, yeah, Budanov's right. The situation is deteriorating, but the idea that this is going to end in a negotiation between Ukraine and Russia is absurd. Ukraine won't be invited to the table, not as long as Zelensky's in power.
But as you mentioned, there has to be negotiations between Russia and the United States.
No, there doesn't. No, there doesn't. There doesn't have to be. Why does there have to be?
So
who is the United States? Who is the United States in this conflict? I'm Russia. You're America.
The main party is the United States, Scott.
No, it's not. How many American troops are on the ground in Ukraine today fighting? None. How many American divisions are committed to the defense of Ukraine? None. The United States isn't the main party of anything. That's the Russia's the main party. Russia's the only party. It's the only one that has a vote because it's the only nation besides Ukraine where there are existential consequences to losing. Ukraine lost. They're finished. Russia is winning. That's how it's going to end. Unless America is willing to say, all in, I'm putting all my chips on the table. This is between you and me, Russia. Only one person walks away. Then America has something to say. But America's not a main player when you're just sitting there writing checks. That's all we've done, write checks, empty, throw some weaponry in there and all that. We're not a main player. We're a non-player, a non-actor. This war doesn't end because America wants it to end. This war ends when Russia is ready to say, we've won what we're willing to win. America's not a main player and main actor. That's what Donald Trump needs to understand. He's a supporting actor in all this, but he's now waltzing in as if this is his war to end. It's not. It's not. Russia has adjusted politically, economically, militarily to the reality that the United States and Europe can continue providing equipment and resources to Ukraine. This is a war of attrition that has that already factored in. Russia has built a military machine that will grind up everything that the United States and NATO gives Ukraine and all the Ukrainian troops there, no matter what happens. That's the reality. So what does Donald Trump get to do? He can say, we're going to shut it off. He can tell the Ukrainians, we're not helping you anymore. But there's no leverage he can put on the Russians. There's nothing he can do to pressure the Russians. The Russians are strategically committed on a course of action that will be sustained no matter what. Donald Trump can help shorten the war by making the Ukrainians understand the reality of what's happening, but the 100-day peace plan that Keith Kellogg's talked to him doesn't do that. It continues to infuse false hope into the Ukrainians, that they're going to be a unified state, that they're going to have this large army, that they're going to have European peacekeepers on their soil, that they're going to join the European Union. I love it when an American president tells Europe that you have to bring in Ukraine by 2030. Ukraine would never qualify for European Union membership, let alone by 2030. This is stupidity of the Donald Trump approach. He should understand that Russia has won this conflict. And the easiest way to bring it into this conflict is to tell Ukrainians, you lost. Zelensky, you're gone. I don't care who you get. Go there and surrender. Surrender on the terms that Russia's willing to give to you. That's the best deal you're going to get. The sooner you do that, the sooner this suffering comes to an end. And then work with the Russians on what a post-conflict European security framework looks like. Donald Trump then can play a role on, does he want NATO to survive? Does he want NATO to, how does he want NATO to be? But NATO can't afford to be anything. Donald Trump has set a minimum standard of 5%. NATO can't afford that. If the United States withdraws, it goes up to 10 to 15%. NATO can't afford that. So, yeah, but the idea that the United States has a say in what's going on in Ukraine is a joke. We can convince ourselves that we're all powerful. The Russians don't care. They've made a decision. They're fully committed to achieving all of their stated objectives on terms that they will accept, as Putin says, based upon the present reality.
And what's so amazing to see that on one side we see that Donald Trump is talking about the conflict, the casualties. On the other hand, we see the head of Russian intelligence is talking about the future of the western part of Ukraine. He asked the historians in Russia, in Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia to talk about the future of the western part of Ukraine. It seems that they're on the both United States and Russia are not on the same page. They're they're talking. They already have started talking about the western part of Ukraine. What would be the future in the western part of Ukraine with the various ethnicities? But we in the West, they're still talking about Russia is losing. It's unbelievable the level of disconnection between these two parts.
One is reality based, the other one's fantasy based. I can guarantee you that the discussion the Russians are having about the future of Western Ukraine will dominate Western Ukraine for decades to come. Western Ukraine isn't going to be part of any, post-Ukrainian world that's created by the United States. Russia is looking at Kiev being a rump state, completely subordinated to Russia, and they're looking at disposing of Western Ukraine to other people. The belief is that Poland would never allow a Banderist government to thrive in Lvov and other cities, that Hungary would be more than happy to take control of the Carpathian region. So would Romania. They're talking about breaking up the problem because the problem of Ukrainian nationalism is grounded in the West. That's a reality. That's the facts. And the victors get to decide how the spoils are divided, and Russia is the victor.
Let's assume the next administration in Germany would decide about reconnecting the line, the gas line between Russia and Germany. Here is the position of Poland. Recently, the president of Poland said that they're not going to let the connection, these pipeline, be restored again. How powerful is Poland if Germany decides to reconnect the pipeline and Russia wants to be part of that deal? And how important is the role of the United States or maybe Poland in that decision?
Poland will find itself isolated if it tries to do this. There is infrastructure that goes across Polish soil that Poland could, but they'll pay a price. They'll become isolated. We're getting into the world of energy security. Germany has now become quite cognizant of the fact that its future economic health won't be viable unless they have access to cheap Russian gas. I think you'll find, again, it always comes down to the economy. At the end of the day, if Poland becomes isolated, its economy crumbles, the politicians that are responsible for that will likewise fall, and you'll get a new group of Polish politicians in who will do what's necessary to stay politically viable, and that means that they're going to focus on the economic health of Poland. And then the economic health be furthered by not alienating them with not just Russia, but their European neighbors, Germany. I think we're looking at a new reality where Poland and Germany will not be allies for much longer. They will become more than competitors, adversaries. I think the Russians aren't stupid, and I think the Russians redrawing the map of Ukraine and getting Western nations to part. I think it'll revive feelings in Germany about territories that were ceded to Poland at the end of the Second World War. This is what the United States needs to stop. See, this is where strategic thinking on the part of the United States needs to come in. We need to step in, let Russia win in Ukraine because they've won, but we need to create a European security framework where this kind of nonsense is taking place. We need to preempt the Russian effort to divide Western Ukraine. You know, and this is where we could have leverage. We're not talking about putting Western troops in. We're not talking, but telling the Russians that the issue of the inviolability of borders, the rights of people, etc. There has to be a process that's done that doesn't allow this to create, emotions that run out of control and start talking about the breakup of Europe. But Trump, he's just not smart enough. He doesn't understand European history. He doesn't understand the foundational elements that go into play, and national competitions, etc. And so he's failing to see that what he's doing is creating the conditions for Europe to become even more chaotic and anarchy-ridden and violent. The potential of European wars is real. There is genuine animosity between Germany and Poland, and it can be exacerbated. And the Russians, aren't. They have to look out for their own best interests. And if you have a European Union today, the head of the foreign ministry of the European Union, this Kallas girl, is talking about the breakup of Russia into its tiny little parts. I think Russia would be well advised to ensure that Europe gets broken up into tiny little parts and just let Europe be Europe. This is what the United States should be working on while we still have influence in Europe, and we still have influence, or we could get influence with Russia. This is what we should have as our focus, creating a stable Europe, post-conflict Europe, that's not reliant upon the United States for security, that has realistic security aspirations, that don't view Russia as an imminent adversary. Therefore, you can bring military spending under control, focus on economic recovery. This is what really we should be doing. But we're not. I mean, we're letting Poland, talk stupidly. Donald Trump has spoken about withdrawing 20% of American forces from Europe in the near future. My advice to him is to pull all the troops out of Poland and watch what Poland does. See, Poland right now thinks that they're, we got American troops. We're the new Germany. Pull them all out, Donald. Get them all out of Poland. Shut down the American bases there. Just let Poland understand the reality that you're on your own. Therefore, you don't get to hide behind the shield of America anymore. All the stupidity that you're talking, you alone will pay the consequences for it. Good luck. And watch how quickly Poland changes it too. The same thing with the Baltics. Watch how quickly they change their tune when they realize they don't have an American and a NATO shield anymore, that they suddenly have to learn how to live. If you go around, you're 5'2" and you go around and you're poking the 6'4" person in the chest all the time because you got your 6'5" person over here. The 6'5" person leaves. You'll stop poking the 6'4" person in the chest. You'll stop in a heartbeat. This is the kind of healthy environment Europe needs. NATO has created a situation where Eastern Europe has been empowered into believing that they get to dictate the security for all of Europe. And I think France and Germany and Italy are not playing that game anymore. And so, how do you resolve these tensions without having Europe, break down and promote conflict between old Europe and new Europe? This is what the United States should be focused on, not on a conflict we don't understand, a conflict we helped create, but we don't understand at all. And we don't have any way to solve. There's nothing we can bring to the table to solve the conflict in Ukraine. The only thing we can do is make the price paid by the Ukrainians even higher by continuing the conflict.
You've mentioned that Donald Trump doesn't understand Europe, but does he care about Europe? What is the priority of Donald Trump? Is it the first priority, second, third, fourth? Well, how does it fit in his sort of view?
I don't know. I think Donald Trump wakes up in the morning and whatever is on his plate is his priority. I don't think he has a strategic vision for Europe other than reducing American military commitment. Um, but he's all over the map. One moment he's talking about we could withdraw from NATO. The other moment he's talking about we'll invest more if NATO's willing to invest more. Well, if you want to withdraw, why do you want to invest? I mean, it's stupid. To invest to what end? To build a military to do what? Confront Russia? That's the problem all along. Donald Trump has no idea what he wants, or how he's going to get there. He's a transactional guy. And so whatever looks like it's the best deal at the moment is the direction he will go. Right now, I think that we are headed towards a rupture between the United States and Europe and the end of NATO. But again, you never know with Donald Trump. He may decide that, peace through strength, and we've got to be strong, and therefore we're going to double down on Europe. But on the other hand, he just committed to building an Iron Dome in America, and the money that is needed for that, means that we probably aren't going to be doing much more ballistic missile defense in Europe. So,
and we know that increasing from 2% to 5% defense budget of their GDP, at least for Germany, is impossible. It's not Estonia, not Latvia, it's Germany, and we know what is going on in Germany with the German economy. Does that mean that Donald Trump wants to put an end to NATO indirectly, in the way that he's talking about increasing and increasing? Last time he was in office, in his first term, he was trying to put 2% of their GDP, 2.5. Right now, 5%. And what would be the limitation for that? And what is the necessity of that? What has happened since the last time he was in office? And what is the new threat coming to Europe? As you mentioned, Russia is not interested in attacking Europe. And who's going to...
what happens the last time is the war in Ukraine. And Donald Trump's saying that if Europe wants to support Ukraine, then Europe has to pay for it. Not just that, but if you want American presence on the ground in Europe, you have to pay for it. He's talking about pulling out 20,000 troops. He's saying the troops that remain behind, you're paying for them, not us. We're doing you a favor. And I think what he's doing is creating the conditions that Europe can't meet, and therefore empowers him to say, well, then we're unplugging. We're not going to be doing this, forever. So I think that's some of the reasoning behind Donald Trump, that if you want us to be there, you got to pay for it. If you can't afford to pay for it, then we're going to leave.
Yeah. Once Churchill said that there is no endless or forever friendship or enmity, but there is forever common interest between the two parties involved in a negotiation. Here comes the question, the alliance, NATO alliance. How is that going to fit in that picture that we get from this saying of Churchill? Is that fitting the picture, or what's going on in BRICS, between the BRICS countries, is fitting in the picture of that Churchill has drawn for us?
First of all, I don't think NATO has common purpose anymore. Clearly, the United States is not looking for the same thing that Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania and Poland are looking for. Germany's focus is on something other than what Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland are looking for. France is worried about different things. Italy's worried about different things. France and Germany don't agree. Italy doesn't agree with France and doesn't agree with Germany. Great Britain is not part of the European equation anymore. They don't agree with anybody. And the United States is looking out for the United States. So the concept of a unified Europe, a unified NATO is ridiculous. So there are no common causes that, and foundations for special relationships anymore. I think Churchill was speaking about a time that no longer exists. And one of the main reasons is that Europe has created relationships that are contingent upon, a military alliance. The interesting thing about BRICS is there's no military aspect to it whatsoever. It's purely geopolitically, economically, focused. And that's the future going forward. The future is not sustainment of a military industrial complex. The future is sustainment of global supply chains, and developing economic relationships that are mutually beneficial. And I think that at the end of the day, you're going to see that's going to become a far more attractive model to Europe than sustaining this failed, military alliance, which has lost all reason to exist, has become unaffordable, and which, frankly speaking, is breaking Europe apart.
And we've seen what has happened with DeepSeek AI and how it influenced the market in the United States. Do you think that the new administration, the Trump administration, understand that the future is not about war as we've seen so far? It's all about producing, and it's all about invention and the new manner of fighting, which China, I think, is the master of that.
Well, first of all, this Deep Six phenomena, the tanking of NVIDIA, it just happened. And so I have to tell you that, I've read about it, but I can't sit here and tell you, exactly how this happened and why it happened and what it means. It's too soon. It would require also, to answer that question, you'd have to have a lot more insight into, China's approach, etc. Was this a fluke? Was this, part of an overall strategy? What happened here? It's too early to say, but I would say that whatever the answer is, it's going to be grounded in reality. It's not going to be, cooking of the market and, fantasy and all this stuff. It'll be fact-based. And that puts the Trump administration at a disadvantage because they have a very artificial, superficial understanding of China. My understanding is that the Deep Six didn't make use of new Chinese emerging technologies. But what we do know, though, is that China has, mastered certain technologies that the West has tried to deny it access to. That's the mistake. We don't respect China. We always think that China is what we like to call near peer, meaning they're not quite our peers. They're close, but they're not as good as we are. When the reality is we're not even near peer to China on some of these things, that China is so far ahead of us. And that's the danger of BRICS, is that BRICS is, it is representative of a whole new mindset that's taking, grab in the world today, that puts the economy ahead of the military. And until the United States breaks free of that paradigm, this military first, this need to build the greatest and strongest military in the world, that doesn't do you any good when China dominates. What's going to happen? Donald Trump, I'm going to take over the Panama Canal because the Chinese have control of it. Well, they don't. The Chinese management companies out of Hong Kong manage it. But you know what the Chinese will have control of pretty soon? They put a couple $2 billion port in Peru, and they're now building high-speed rail connectivity between Peru and Brazil. And so now Chinese ships can come to Peru. They don't have to go through the Panama Canal, offload their cargo on a massive scale, and get that shipped into Brazil, bypassing the Panama Canal. What's Trump going to do about that? Because that's happening as we speak. See, this is what happens when you put too much emphasis on defending this geographically important canal. This is the most important thing in the world. We need to control this transit here, da-da-da. But what happens when China goes, we don't care. We're landing in Peru, and then we're putting it on a ship, on trains, and they're going to get to Brazil before your ship can even get through the canal. How's the United States going to handle that? Go to war? Threaten Peru? Deploy the U.S. Fourth Fleet off the coast of Peru to blockade the port? we're not thinking right. We're not thinking strategically. We're especially Donald Trump. It's just a very simplistic approach to things. Greenland. Let's take that. Let's say he gets control of Greenland. How many icebreakers does the United States have? Not that many. Not enough. So we haven't improved anything. And all we've done is create tension and expectations, because now that becomes our territorial waters and we have to build icebreakers that we don't have the shipbuilding capacity to do. Meanwhile, Russia has all the icebreakers in the world and they're just running around breaking ice. The Chinese are building a fleet of icebreakers. They're outproducing our ship production 240 to 1. Let's make it a little bit higher, because the Chinese are going to say, we need to build icebreakers, and they're going to build icebreakers. We're focused on legacy thinking about, the importance of things that were, geopolitically important, 30 years ago, forgetting that the world has changed, and that the people that we're competing against are better at the critical aspects of this competition than we are. China builds high-speed trains better than anybody, and Russia builds icebreakers better than anybody. And if you're going to be using the northern, northwest passages and all that, you need icebreakers. And if you're going to be shipping stuff across the South American continent, you need high-speed trains. And we can't compete in either one of those. We're too busy talking about seizing control of the Panama Canal and seizing control of Greenland.
One of the main policies of Trump was the immigration, and we know that how influential Elon Musk is on Donald Trump when it comes to immigration, and he changed his mind, Donald Trump's mind, about H-1B visas. Do you think that he would, on the other hand, we know that Elon Musk is not interested in these endless wars. Is he going to influence Donald Trump on the issues that you've mentioned about China and not understanding what China is, what BRICS is? Is he going to improve or make this administration understand what's going on?
I don't know. I mean, he's not he's not an elected official.
Considering that Vivek Ramaswamy has left the administration. Vivek Ramaswamy.
Right. Well, Vivek wants to run for governor of Ohio, I believe. Plus, I think that he was running into the fact that he and Donald Trump are inherently incompatible when it comes to behind closed doors. I don't know how much longer the Elon Musk, gravy train is going to be out there. Trump's no longer a candidate. He's no longer president-elect. He's the president of the United States, and he alone makes the policies. And, Elon Musk has a very influential platform, but he has to be careful of alienating Trump, believing that he is the president, Trump isn't, that he's in charge, Trump isn't. Musk has a big ego. Now, if they can learn to manage these two egos, Trump listens to him. Elon Musk, has good relations with people in the Trump in the Trump camp and with Trump himself. But I think these relations only last so long as Elon Musk understands the power, the power structure here. There's the president, and Elon Musk isn't the president, and needs to always remember that fact. And whether or not Musk can do that, because I think Musk is going to also learn, as Vivek did, that Trump is really shallow and really stupid on many issues. And that could be very frustrating for somebody who's not stupid and shallow. And I don't think Elon Musk is stupid or shallow. And we'll see what happens. It's he's also a businessman, and I think he knows when there's good opportunity and when there's bad opportunity. And I think right now he's looking at good opportunity, and he can use that in a way that furthers his own political cachet. He can never be president of the United States because he's not a natural born American, but this is a man who wants to become the dictator of Mars. So let's let's see what happens. But it's definite battle of the egos right now. But there's only one ego that can win, and that's Donald Trump.
Donald Trump talking about before January 20th, he forced Netanyahu into a negotiation, into a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. And during his inauguration, in his speech, he didn't brag that much about what he has done, which, in my opinion, was huge in terms of what has happened in Gaza. But he didn't talk that much about it. And later on, he was asked the day after his inauguration, when he was signing his executive orders, he said that he was asked about the future of the ceasefire. He said, "I don't know. This is not our war. This is their war." And Gaza then went on, and we can build Gaza. It is a beautiful place that we can rebuild it, and all of that. And recently, he said that he was trying to force Egypt and Jordan to accept Gazans to go there. That was the same sort of policy that we've seen from Anthony Blinken and the administration of Joe Biden. What's happening right now in the mind of, not put it that way, I know that you're going to say, I don't know what's going on in the mind of Donald Trump, but what's the strategy when you see all of these contradictory pictures together?
Well, remember, Donald Trump was successful in putting pressure on Netanyahu to get a ceasefire. But then Donald Trump's lack of understanding of the realities on the ground, he said things such as Hamas cannot be part of, Gaza's future, and that, the Palestinian people, are going to have to move so we can rebuild. And then you have the images of the hostages being released and the Al-Qassam brigades out there in full strength. Nobody defeated them. And they are in charge. And the Palestinian people, rather than saying, please remove us, lined up to march in on northern Gaza to reoccupy this devastated land because that's their home. And Trump doesn't know how to deal with that reality. He went to Egypt and Jordan thinking that he'd be Donald Trump, and they said no, because they know that if they bring in these refugees, if they bring in the Palestinians, it'll be the end of their respective governments. Donald Trump this is what happens when you don't surround yourself with genuine experts, when you surround yourself with superficial people. Because you create superficial solutions to complicated problems, which means you don't have a solution at all. And he will his go-to move is to punt. Things are bad. It's Israel's fault. That's your problem. You solved that one. We're done with this. We did what we can. We're out of here. That's not a solution. Just like with Ukraine. I mean, he's going to run away from these problems. Because to double down and get you entangled in the very conflicts you told the American people you were not going to get entangled with when you ran for office.
And the vice president of Iran in Davos was asked in the World Economic Forum, was asked about the policies of Iran in Gaza. The answer that he gave us that what is happening in Gaza, even in Lebanon, is not related to what's going on between Iran and the United States, because in his view, the resistance exists because of the occupation. It's not invented by Iran and Iranian government. Even before the Iranian revolution, we had that sort of resistance. How is that going to be understandable for the administration in the United States?
I don't know. I don't know what their level of comprehension capabilities are. Again, if he had the right advisors, they would make just that statement, that Hezbollah is empowered by Israel's ongoing illegal occupation of Lebanon. And now that Israel has doubled down on stupid and refused to remove itself from even more territories, all that does is further legitimize the resistance. But Lebanon's resistance against illegal Israeli occupation in southern Lebanon has nothing to do with Iran negotiating a strategic framework with the United States. The problem is Trump is a transactional guy, so he's going to come in and try and say, well, you have to pull the plug on Hezbollah, and the Iranians are going to say it's not our job to pull the plug on Hezbollah. It's a resistance movement against an illegal occupation. It's your job to get the Israelis out. If you get the Israelis out of southern Lebanon, then Hezbollah, I believe, is going to work with the Lebanese government, of which it is a major part, to create stability. But Hezbollah's whole purpose to exist isn't Gaza, isn't to further Iranian interests. It's to liberate all of Lebanon's soil. That's the only reason why Hezbollah retains legitimacy in the eyes of so many Lebanese, because the Hezbollah is obligated under Security Council resolution to turn in its weaponry, to demobilize. But it didn't because of Israel's ongoing occupation of the Shebaa farms, which Lebanon views as its own territory. Now Israel's occupied even more territory in southern Lebanon. So, the Iranians are 100% correct on this one.
And when it comes to the situation in Syria, it seems that the Trump administration, here is what Tulsi Gabbard Scott said about Turkey in Syria.
He's one of the most dangerous. Turkey's Erdogan is not our friend. He's one of the most dangerous dictators in the world, and the United States government and media have no business helping this Islamist megalomaniac and his al-Qaeda partners. Turkey's been supporting ISIS and al-Qaeda terrorists from behind the scenes for years.
Is that going to change the picture in the eyes of the new administration toward Turkey, or it's a statement by an official of the government, I don't know yet, in the United States?
I mean, it's sort of a one-sided picture that she's painted there. It's not an inaccurate picture. In addition to Al-Qaeda, Turkey's been, supporting, sustaining the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamist elements. There's a reality that Turkey is not just a Muslim state, but an Islamist state under Erdogan. But the other reality is that Turkey is a NATO member. How do you balance that one, Tulsi? That's a tough one. And Turkey is also a very critical regional actor who aspires to be part of BRICS. Tulsi, do you really want Turkey to go to BRICS? Do you have a plan for BRICS? So what she's saying is accurate, but it's a far more complicated, nuanced picture than what she's put forward there. And the reality is the United States has a history of Tulsi. Who funded Al-Qaeda? Saudi Arabia, you think? You think there's some Saudi? And yet we have very tight relations with the Saudis. Isn't that complicated? Of course it's complicated. We live in a complicated world. She's not wrong to point out the realities of Turkey so that we don't have rose-colored glasses on there. But I think it's a mistake to say that we're going to build our relationship with Turkey solely based upon Tulsi Gabbard's assessment of Turkey's ongoing support for Al-Qaeda and their status as an Islamist nation. So it's far more complicated than that. And, the United States needs to be careful here. We of course, don't want to give Turkey unfettered, unconstrained access to rebuild the Levant in an Ottoman-like manner. But we also don't want to react precipitously and push Turkey into a conflict with the West or a total divorce from the West and jumping in with 2 feet into BRICS, which would put us in even greater geopolitical problems. So, I mean, I respect Tulsi Gabbard very much, and I think she would be a fantastic director of national intelligence. But, one of the things that when you're the director is that you bring in the genuine experts. Your job is to be more of a manager than an analyst, and have the experts lay this out, and then you take that data and you present it to the president. you can put your own personal spin on things, but it has to be an informed position. And what Tulsi Gabbard said there was just a very one-sided portrait of Erdogan and Turkey.
Do you think that Donald Trump is in a position to force Netanyahu to go forward with his plan if we assume that Donald Trump is not interested in escalating the situation?
I don't know. Is Netanyahu even going to be around? Last time I saw him, he was getting fingerprinted in court. So, look, Donald Trump, the United States has the ability to leverage its power on a number of nations in the world. Israel is one of them. If Trump wants to pressure Netanyahu, he can pressure. Turkey's another one, by the way. We can collapse the Turkish economy in a moment's notice. And Erdogan knows that at this point in time. And so it's transactional. But in the case of Israel, it's also political. I mean, given the role that the pro-Israeli lobby plays in financing Trump's political campaigns, and he has surrounded himself with very staunch advocates of Israel and Zionism. So Trump has to also be a little bit careful about going forward too strongly, lest he brook a lot of pushback within his administration.
How do you see the deal between Iran and the United States? Are we gonna finally get a deal that would work for both parties? Recently, the foreign minister of Iran was talking with Sky News, Sky News. Yeah, he said that the terms are much more complicated because of the JCPOA and the experience they had with the United States, but they're open because the main objective of diplomacy is hope. And for any administration, they're ready to talk, they're ready to negotiate. And do you see that Donald Trump, in the case of Iran, would be successful?
There's no reason for him not to be successful. Look, he has the history of the North Korean negotiations, and he knows what happens when you're on the cusp of a deal, but you have hardliners in your administration, making more and more demands. The deal collapses, and you end up having nothing. I think that there's a deal to be had, a deal that can resolve Trump's political issues surrounding Iran's nuclear program, and can resolve Iran's not just political issues, but also economic needs through the lifting of sanctions. And I think, both sides can come to the table, and there's a deal to be had. And I think that Donald Trump would be able to make this deal because there's no connection right now. Even Israel is starting to focus more on Turkey than Iran. You had a senior Israeli official say the Iran project's no longer our number one priority. Managing this new empowered Turkey is. And I think that even Israel is looking forward to stability that could be engendered into this. And BRICS is an effective way to absorb Iran's economic focus, meaning that Iran will become sort of regulated by its BRICS membership and the economic interaction therein. So I do think there's a deal to be had here. Again, whether Donald Trump is capable of, executing that kind of deal of conceiving, of accepting the nuances and the give and take. This isn't going to be a dictated outcome. This will be a negotiation. If Donald Trump can get the right people involved in this negotiation, I think that there's a deal to be had that'll be to the satisfaction of all parties.
Thank you so much, Scott, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always.
Thanks for having me.